Special thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. The internet hates nuance. Every conversation I run across about tactical aircraft on Reddit or YouTube or X or TikTok or anywhere really all seem to revolve around this upvote, downvote philosophy. This idea that aircraft are either good or they're bad. They'll either win or they'll lose. And this oversimplification of complex military technology violates what I consider to be one of the most fundamental laws of warfare, that there are no absolutes in combat. So let's talk about one of the most controversial aircraft in the sky today, Russia's Sukhoi Su-57. Because depending on who you ask online, it's either an incredibly advanced, game-changing platform or a flying scrap heap. But the truth, as is so often the case, is actually somewhere in between. So I'm gonna run down why the Su-57 may be a better aircraft than you realize, but also why it's probably worse than most people realize as well. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Airpower. Russia's Sukhoi Su-57 is strategically worthless, but hear me out, it's not that bad a jet. The way we talk about Russia's stealth fighter would lead many to believe that it's nothing but a flying scrap heap, and that has a lot to do with the way Russia chose to frame this platform as it entered operational service. You see, Russia has a long and chronic history of overstating their military capability to convey a false image of military prowess, and the Su-57 could be a poster child for this problem. It was touted as a direct competitor with America's F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, but it falls so far short of the fifth-generation capabilities that we expect out of these platforms that it is widely understood to be the worst fifth-generation fighter on the planet. But here's the thing. The fifth generation of fighters is a pretty elite fraternity. According to Global Firepower's last tally, in 2024, there are around 10,641 fighters on the planet today, operated by 92 different nations. And doing a bit of quick back-of-the-envelope math, there are maybe 1,440 or 1,450 tops stealth fighters in service around the world as well. Now that means only about 13% of the world's fighters belong to the fifth generation. And while the US does operate more fifth generation fighters than any other nation on the planet, by a wide margin, with some 630 F-35s, according to an April 2024 Government Accountability Office report, and another 150 or so combat-coded F-22 Raptors, America's fifth generation fighters are still in the minority, representing only about 35 to 40% of America's overall fighter strength. And what that means is that while the Su-57 is straight up outclassed by the likes of the F-22, the F-35, and even China's J-20 to a large extent, it could still have the advantage when flying into the majority of engagements, which would more often than not be against fourth generation fighters. And this is where Russia's habit of overstating capability really comes back to bite them, because the Su-57 is touted as a fifth generation or stealth fighter, largely because it was designed with reducing its radar return in mind, which is really the only technical requirement for the designation. But a more objective classification may have placed it not at the bottom of the fifth generation heap, but near the top of the fourth generation one. Now, radar cross-sections, or the radar return of aircraft, are notoriously difficult to calculate and vary depending on angle of observation, radar frequency, and the material makeup of the aircraft. So we should always take online discussions about radar cross-sections, or RCSs, with a big grain of salt. But Sukhoi's patent paperwork say the Su-57's radar cross-section is between 0.1 and 1 square meter, which is objectively pretty bad for a fifth generation fighter. That's between 30 and 300 times larger than the F-117 Nighthawk would appear on radar, and maybe as much as 10,000 times larger than the F-22 Raptor. But the Su-57 still represents a significant leap in low observability over its own precursor, the Su-27, and by comparison to many fourth generation fighters in service today. With a radar cross-section of between 0.1 and 1 square meter, that means the Su-57's radar return is between 5 and 50 times better than a MiG-29, between 15 and 150 times better than the Su-27, and between 25 and 250 times better than an F-15C. And make no mistake, that matters. Stealth has never been about being invisible and has always been about delaying detection to give you more tactical opportunity to make a shot. And the Su-57 does have that advantage heading into the merge against just about any 4th generation fighter, with maybe the rare exception of platforms like the Havglass 5 F-16. Even the FA-18 Super Hornet, which I frequently compare to the Su-57 because they have comparable radar returns, can really only match the Su-57 when flying naked, without any weapons on board at all. But I know what you're thinking. How could the Su-57 have that radar return when you've seen pictures of Phillips head screws hanging out of the wings? And to be clear, that criticism is well deserved, because while those were prototype aircraft, Russia opted to put those prototypes into service, deploying them to Syria in 2018 for the purposes of garnering media attention. But it's worth noting that the serial production Su-57s built after those prototypes have a significantly better finish, and you won't find nearly as many Phillips head screws hanging out of them. And the Su-57 boasts a few other pretty impressive feats of Russian engineering, like the nation's first ever active electronically scanned array radar affixed to a fighter. Now, active electronically scanned array radars are basically made up of hundreds of transmit and receive modules that each can work as an array unto themselves, allowing you to broadcast in multiple directions at once on multiple frequencies at once, which can limit your detectability and allow for much higher fidelity in identifying and tracking targets. And while the NO-36 Squirrel radar found in the Su-57 is a first-generation AESA, meaning nowhere near as advanced as the systems you might find in, say, the F-35, it does nonetheless offer some pretty unique capabilities, including 2 cheek-mounted radar arrays that feed directly into the same system, allowing for a much wider field of view and even targeting enemy aircraft while flying perpendicular to them. The Su-57 is also the first operational fighter ever to carry Russia's directional infrared countermeasure system, which is, in effect, small low-powered laser turrets that fire a laser beam directly at the guidance systems of inbound infrared-guided or heat-seeking missiles to confuse them and send them off course. The Su-57 stacks up pretty well in terms of hot rod performance as well, with a top speed of Mach 2 and the ability to supercruise or fly at supersonic speeds without using its afterburner at sustained speeds of Mach 1.3. And its reported thrust-to-weight ratio of around 1.16 to 1 is pretty comparable to the F-15C and not all that far off from the F-22 Raptor. So with all this in mind, why did I open by saying that the Su-57 is strategically worthless? Well, for a whole bunch of reasons, starting with the fact that everything we know about the Su-57, including many of the figures that I just ran through, have all been filtered through the Russian disinformation machine, making it exceedingly difficult to know which capabilities are genuinely here and usable in combat and which ones amount to Putin's warfare fanfiction. And while we're talking about fiction and warfare, let's talk about my preferred kind, which is video games, and namely today's sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and it's available now for free on both PC and consoles. This game will let you take command of over 2,500 different tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 different major nations, ranging from the biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. Now, if you watch this channel, you're probably a military technology nerd like me, and that's why it'll be important for you to know that War Thunder is not about just hitting boxes with hit points. War Thunder has one of the most sophisticated vehicle damage models in gaming. Every vehicle is intricately modeled down to its individual components, like engines, fuel tanks, weapons, and crew, and all of them are susceptible to enemy fire in the form of different kinds of shells and missiles and projectiles, and are protected by different kinds of armor, just like their real-world counterparts. War Thunder lets you immerse yourself in realistic combat thanks to highly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects that place you right at the helm of the most powerful war machines of our time. Join the worldwide community of more than 70 million players taking part in these PvP battles and delve into the breathtaking experience that is War Thunder. With an unmatched wealth of high-quality content, there is simply no better game for military history or military technology buffs. You can play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox right now by following the link in the description below or in the pinned comment. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days with a premium account. This deal's only available for a limited time, so act quick to get in on the War Thunder action. Despite repeated Russian claims that the Su-57 is seeing combat over Ukraine, to date it looks as though these aircraft are primarily launching long-range munitions from deep inside Russian territory, and the few times they do make incursions into Ukrainian airspace, they're accompanied by non-stealth fighters in support, all but confirming suspicions that not only is the Su-57's stealth below par, but its electronic warfare capabilities as well. Multiple media reports from inside Russia point to the fact that the Su-57's onboard avionics suite are not fully mature or fully integrated, meaning many of the Su-57's claimed capabilities are still just that, claims, and cannot actually be used in combat. And that wouldn't be that big of a deal for a developmental effort, but again, these are aircraft that saw their first combat deployments 6 years ago. But most of all, there's Russia's utter inability to build these fighters in numbers that could make them actually matter. The Su-57 first took flight in 2010, and in the 14 years since, the Su-57 program has managed to produce maybe a reported 22 serial production fighters. Now, the F-35 made its first flight 4 years earlier in 2006, and in its first 14 years of production, Lockheed Martin pumped out more than 600 airframes. In fact, they built 121 of them in that 14th year, 2020 alone. The hard truth of the matter is the Su-57 was always a fighter that Russia hoped to build using another country's money. But after their original partner in India backed out of the program, reportedly due to the aircraft's poor performance, especially regarding stealth, Russia has yet to be able to find anyone else to place an order for the Su-57 or their subsequent effort, the Su-75 Checkmate. And that's the reason why today the Checkmate doesn't exist, and the Su-57 exists in such small numbers that the entire program could fall within the margin for error on US Air Force budget sheets. The plain truth is that the Su-57 is vaporware come to life. It is a design and a concept with some legitimate promise, but owned and operated by a nation that places a larger emphasis on information operations than they do on legitimate technological advancement. And what I'm telling you here isn't new. In fact, I'll give you a bit of an I told you so, because all the way back on February 22nd of 2022, literally just days before Russia's invasion of Ukraine began, I published a story on Sandboxx News called How Russia Uses the Media to Convey a False Image of Military Prowess. These days, people love to remind you how many Western analysts considered Russia to be the second most potent military power on the planet prior to their invasion of Ukraine. But they always leave out the fact that there were lots of other analysts, just like me, banging our heads against the wall for years, trying to show the world that it was all just smoke and mirrors. And you can find examples of my efforts in this regard dating back years. 6 years ago, I was already reporting on how Russia manipulates Western media's love affair with outrage and fear to bolster their foreign weapon sales. And by the end of 2018, I was already compiling lists of fake Russian military technology that Western media just bought and then sold back to us, like the robot unveiled at the Putin Youth Forum that turned out to just be a guy in a suit, or the battle mech Kalishnikov unveiled that turned out to just be a statue. By 2019, I was writing pieces like this one, entitled Russia's Military Might is More About Marketing Than Capability, discussing platforms like their Uran 9 infantry drone that was much touted when deployed to Syria before Russia tried to cover up what a catastrophic failure the program was, or weapon systems like the Oceanic Multi-Purpose System Status 6, or the Doomsday Poseidon torpedo, which Russia claimed would have a 50 or even 100 megaton yield, but now turns out to have maybe a 2 megaton yield, if that. Or Russia's nuclear-powered Skyfall missile, which Putin and Western media outlets love to claim would have unlimited range, but was actually a technological folly. Now, I say all this not just to take a victory lap around the internet and pat myself on the back, but to remind you that so much of what we know about Russian military hardware and capabilities are filtered first through the Russian propaganda machine, and second, through the media hyperbole machine. And as a result, all we're often left with is a caricature of the Russian technology they're actually fielding, one that reflects not just its actual capabilities, but also Russia's intended and hopeful capabilities as well. And often media outlets will lean right into that because it makes for a better headline that'll drive more clicks. The reality of military technology and warfare as a whole is that there are no absolutes. The best fighter on the planet can lose a dogfight to a crop duster in the right set of circumstances. And the job of analyzing military technology is not just about comparing specs on a sheet of paper, but also about understanding the context that those specs come from, knowing what level of transparency you can expect from different nations, and whether or not those nations have a media apparatus that is legally allowed to hold their government accountable for spreading false information. Russia spent years and a great deal of resources trying to convince the world that they were a leader in military technology so they could be the weapons supplier of choice for nations on Uncle Sam's naughty list. The idea all along was to claim to have high-end capabilities so they could sell enough hardware to fund the development of high-end capabilities. It's a self-eating snake that ran out of stuff to eat the minute Russia invaded Ukraine and showed the world that they aren't quite what they seem. So to bring this whole rant back around to the Su-57, this platform, perhaps better than any other, perfectly symbolizes this era in Russian military development, a time when perceptions were prioritized over actual capability, when Russia as a whole was so worried about seeming like the toughest guy in the bar that they didn't even notice how soft they were getting. But make no mistake, there's nuance here. Russia has the manpower and leftover Cold War hardware to win this war in Ukraine, especially without continued and concerted support for the Ukrainian side. But regardless of how this conflict ultimately ends, strategically, in the big picture, when we're talking great power competition between global juggernauts, Russia already lost a long time ago, and most of the world is only just now starting to realize it. And I want to thank War Thunder one more time for sponsoring this video. Don't forget that you can play it for free right now on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox by following the link in the description below. And if you're a new player or you just haven't played in 6 months, you'll also get a massive bonus pack across all of those platforms, including multiple premium vehicles and a bunch of other goodies. This deal's only available for a limited time, so make sure you don't miss out. And with that ends yet another edition of airpower from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and motivation from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.